I would like to extend my warm welcome to you all to this webinar, the second one of the series of webinars in 6 UN languages. We partner with the Basel Convention Coordinating Center in Nigeria and the Zero Mercury Working Group to deliver this webinar. On behalf of the Secretariat, I would like to extend my utmost gratitude to the European Union for providing financial support to this activity. The Minamata Convention controls the whole life cycle of mercury from its supply, trade, use, emission, release, and disposal. The control of mercury-added products is one of the obligations that are relevant to all parties. Through the national reports pursuant to Article 21, it has been noted that many countries experience challenges in phasing out mercury-added products by the deadline of 2020 and implementing the amendment of the convention with added new products with later phase-out dates. With the financial support from the European Union, we developed a capacity-building material on mercury-added products in 6 UN languages, in cooperation with a number of partner organizations. This webinar series is to present this material and brush it up with your comments and questions. Under the EU-funded project, we also convened a global workshop on mercury-added products in Geneva in June last year. In cooperation with the partners, some parties have been working to develop national strategies on mercury-added products since then. Other parties also worked on national strategies through other programs, including this specific international program. For this webinar, we invite Nigeria and St. Vincent and the Grenadines to present their strategies. I sincerely wish that the webinar supports the parties to implement the convention's obligations to control mercury-added products. Next slide, please. So here's some housekeeping notes. The first two is about taking the floor. We are not sure whether we have time to allow the oral intervention, but if we do, this is an instruction to raise hand and mute, unmute, and so on. Primarily, we will take up the questions in the chat box. So if you have any question, please type it in the chat box and send to everyone. If you need any technical assistance, please put your message in the chat box and send it to the host or co-host. Please kindly note that this session is being recorded, and please help us keep improving the experience by filling out the survey at the end of this webinar. Next slide is a webinar outline. So the next item is the presentation of the training material by a colleague, Ruvimbo Kamba of the Secretariat. And then the following session will be convened or moderated by Percy Onyanwa of the Basel Convention Coordinating Center, Nigeria. And the case studies will start with the presentation of the checklist by Elena Limberidi of the Zero Mercury Working Group, European Environment Bureau, and then Oluwatoyin Olawanji of Nigeria, Samantha da Silva of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we will have a session on question and answers. I'm looking at whether we have Mr. Mohamed Abdullahi Kamara in the list of participants, but we don't see him in the list. So Mr. Kamara asked of Sierra Leone, a member of the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties to the Minamata Convention, representing Anglophone Africa, was planning to deliver a opening remark, but since he's absent, I think I will skip that one and hand over to my colleague Ruvimbo. Ruvimbo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Isaku. Good day to you all. Ruvimbo Kamba is my name, representing the Secretariat today. I have the honor of presenting to you the English edition of the 6 language training materials, whose cover page is as indicated on the bottom left corner of the screen. These training materials have been developed by the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention on Mercury to help parties better understand and fulfill their Article 4 obligations on controlling mercury-added products. They have been developed in the 6 official UN languages and are intended for use by governments in training of government officials involved in controlling the mercury-added products, and therefore they can be customized to suit the national context. The English version is available in both PDF and PowerPoint formats using the link provided in this slide. These training materials, together with this 6 language webinar series, as you've heard from Isaku, have been made possible through the generous financial support of the European Union, and they are available on the convention web using the links mentioned. Next. So the training material is organized into 6 sections as outlined. While the full package is over 70 slides, today we'll present only part of it. Next slide, please. So having been adopted in October 2013 and having entered into force in August 2017, when the 50-party ratification milestone was reached, the convention is now barely 7 years old and has a total of 148 parties to date. The primary objective of the convention, as outlined, if you could take it back a bit, Sharif, thank you. The primary objective is outlined in Article 1 is to protect the human health and environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. Thank you. Next one. So I'll spend a bit more time on this slide to explain how the convention controls the entire life cycle of mercury, from supply and trade through to controlling the products and processes using mercury and all the emissions and releases to air, land, and water. This includes both those from intentional and unintentional emissions and releases deriving from mercury in fuels and in ores. The Minamata Convention controls the whole life cycle of mercury by, firstly, reducing the supply of mercury in use and in commerce through banning new mercury mines, phasing out existing mercury mines, and imposing a prior informed consent procedure for trade in elemental mercury. Secondly, the convention does this by phasing out and phasing down the use of mercury in products and industrial processes. Thirdly, it does so by controlling emissions and releases to air, water, and land, including through reducing and eliminating mercury use in the gold mining sector. It also addresses safe storage of mercury still in use, its disposal once it becomes waste, as well as mercury contaminated sites. Next slide, please. Now turning to the core of our discussion today, listed before you on the left is a set of images of some of the mercury-added products that we encounter in our day-to-day lives that were listed for phase-out by the year 2020. Next slide. Back. On your right are similar products, however, added by COP decisions to amend Annex A and therefore targeted for phase out from the year 2025 going forth. You may already note that some products such as mercury batteries are no longer common to encounter as others, thanks to the wider adoption of replacement technologies and substitute products, which are discussed in depth in the training materials. Next slide, please. The convention sets out 4 legally binding obligations for parties under Article 4. On the left-hand side of the slide is the convention extract. It's an extract from the convention text to that effect. According to the convention text, parties shall not allow the manufacture and import or export of mercury-added products listed in Part 1 of Annex A after the specified phase-out deadline, unless an exemption has been registered by the party. Parties are also obliged to take measures listed in Part 2 of Annex A to phase down the use of dental amalgam. Thirdly, the incorporation of mercury-added products listed in Part 1 of Annex A into assembled products is to be prevented through appropriate measures. And lastly, the manufacture and distribution and commerce of mercury-added products not covered by any non-use before the convention is to be discouraged. So basically, the convention, this Annex A, Part 1 of Annex A presents a list of mercury-added products with the date of phase out of manufacture, import, and export. It originally listed 9 products with the phase-out date of 2020. However, later amendments added products with phase-out dates of 2025 to 2027. And Annex A Part 2, on the other hand, presents a list of mercury-added products and measures to be taken. Currently, it only presents measures to phase down the use of just one product, dental amalgam. Annex A also provides for exclusions, for example, products used for research or as a reference standard or for military use, among other cases. Next slide, please. So this and the following slides display the comprehensive list of the original and subsequent amendments to Annex A Part 1. As you can see, COP5 agreed to phase out all the fluorescent lamps for general lighting, and all other amendments whose corresponding phase-out dates ranging from 2025 to 2027 have been shaded in light blue. Next slide, please. Another notable amendment at COP5 was that of removing the threshold of 1 part per million from the mercury-added cosmetics. Therefore, mercury-added cosmetics are to be totally phased out without the need to measure the mercury content. Next slide. As you can see, the list of Annex A Part 1 mercury-added products, including their corresponding phase-out dates, is quite long. I therefore shall not go into too much detail in the interest of time. Next slide. This slide presents the original 9 measures to phase down the use of mercury in dental fillings listed in Annex A Part 2, of which parties were to implement 2 measures. Next slide, please. Annex A Part 2 was amended twice. COP4 agreed to avoid the use of dental amalgam for children and pregnant or breastfeeding women and in bulk form. COP5 later agreed to require parties to submit a national plan or report to phase down the use of dental amalgam. COP5 also decided to consider at its 6th meeting the proposal to amend Part 1 of Annex A by adding the phase out of dental amalgam by 2030. Next slide, please. So in summary, to date, Annex A has been amended twice, firstly at COP4 in 2022 and more recently at COP5 in 2023. I've already discussed the specifics of the amended Part 1 measures in the previous slides. Next slide, please. Now turning to the procedure for entry into force of the amendments, I wish to further point out that the adopted COP5 Decision 5/4 to amend Annexes A and B was officially communicated by the UN Secretary General at the depository on the 25th of April 2024. Therefore, pursuant to paragraph 3C of Article 27, the amendment enters into force on 25 April 2025, exactly 1 year after the official communication. An exception is there, however, for a party that has notified the depository in writing that it is unable to accept the amended text pursuant to paragraph 3B of Article 27. The amendment shall also enter into force for any party that had made a declaration with regard to the amendment of annexes in accordance with paragraph 5 of Article 30 on the 90th day after the date it is deposited with the depository its instrument of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession with respect to the amendment. Next slide, please. Moving on specifically to cosmetics, COP5 also requested the Secretariat to compile information on the challenges faced by parties in phasing out mercury-added products. The information gathered will inform discussions at COP6 in 2025. To that effect, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on 5 March 2024 issued a letter inviting parties and relevant stakeholders to submit information to the Secretariat by 30 June 2024. Engagement of a consultant who will synthesize the submitted information into a draft report that is to be available to parties and relevant stakeholders by 31 March 2025 is presently ongoing after successfully advertising for the post. After the review process, the Secretariat shall then prepare a final report for consideration at COP6. Next slide, please. This slide shows the format for the submission of the information by 30 June. As shown in the slide, this report will be developed in cooperation with the World Health Organization and the Global Mercury Partnership, and there will be an opportunity for commenting on that draft report. We encourage the submission of information by the end of this month to contribute to the fruitful consideration at COP6. Next slide. Having presented some of the training material contents and COP5 amendments, I now draw your attention to the Minamata Convention online forum, which was officially launched on the 8th of May this year. This platform presents you with an opportunity to download and provide feedback on the training materials which we have just discussed, while also allowing users to provide any other updates and raise questions on mercury-added products, including those related to the implementation of Article 4 obligations. We encourage and invite you all to register and log in to this platform using the links provided in this slide. So this is how the forum looks like. And before you are the instructions for how to post on the forum. Next slide, please. Also designed to support parties and to enhance their understanding of the Minamata Convention is the recently launched Minamata Tools, which is a series of modules developed by the Convention Secretariat in partnership with the United Nations System Staff College with financial support of the EU. We invite national focal points and other interested government officials to register for these modules, learn and obtain a certificate of completion. Next slide. So to register for the modules under the Minamata tools, you can either scan the above QR code or follow the link provided in this slide. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, Pasi, go ahead, please.
All right. Thank you, Ruvimbo, for that very excellent summary of the training materials. And I hope participants have found it very useful. If there are any questions, we will take those at the end of the, when it's due in the agenda of the webinar. Now we shall go on next to the next section, which discusses case studies and national strategies to control mercury-added products. The convention requires that parties develop and implement strategies to control mercury-added products, and many countries are already doing this. We will have the benefit of the experiences of Nigeria and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But before then, we shall listen to Elena Limberidi from the Global Mercury Partnership discuss first the guidelines and the checklists for developing and implementing these strategies. Elena, I welcome you to have the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Percy, and to the Minamata Secretariat for this invitation. I'm Elena Limberidi Setimo from the European Environmental Bureau and the Zero Mercury Working Group. Next slide, please. And as you may know, the Zero Mercury Working Group, it's an international coalition of more than 110 public interest NGOs from over 55 countries. And we've been following mercury work for 20 years now and more than that. Next slide, please. So when the convention was indeed adopted and required the phase out of the import, export, and manufacturing of the mercury-added products, there was no method of showing how countries could eventually do that. So inspired by the WHO and Healthy Without Harm report on developing national strategies that was developed in 2015, we came out with a guide and checklist towards phasing out mercury-added products. Next slide, please. So this guide was developed initially in 2017 under the African, Caribbean, Pacific program funded by UNEP and the European Union. And so we have used this now for many years, and we've been receiving feedback from the governments, and this the checklist has now been enhanced and revised on the base of this experience. So the main steps that we would be proposing to follow towards developing a strategy to phase out mercury-added products would be first to look at the stakeholder engagement strategy, then look at the national situation of the country, where we are and what are the gaps, then address those gaps that have been identified to see what are our capacity needs and where they are the areas which need to be strengthened. And finally, to identify these concrete deliverables and actions, and eventually, which will eventually lead us to a national action plan. Next slide, please. So to go a little bit further into the different steps, the first step is very important because we need to identify who are the relevant players in relation to the mercury-added products. Of course, we don't need to start from scratch. Most of us have been working on the Minamata initial assessments, so it will be very useful to look at those committees, steering committees, or other coordination bodies that have been developed. We will need to look at the roles and responsibilities that each organization, each agency will have. And it will be very important for all of those partners to share the responsibility and be aware of what the Minamata consists of and requires. So under this step, we would need to describe the steps to engage the stakeholders, identify them, of course, and also remember to look at stakeholders which might be relevant specifically to the different mercury-added products, as these may differ from one product to the next. Next slide, please. So the second part, which is also the most important, is to do a national situation assessment. To do this, it is proposed to indeed look at our national assessment, again, starting from the MIA or other relevant projects, and then identify and list these gaps and challenges in relation to the national situation. And to facilitate that, we have structured this in 6 areas. And then, as I said before, it is very important under each of these areas to be thinking about the individual mercury-added products to look at. So the first area would be to look at the institutional framework, to assess that, to see the structures that we have in place. This touches also a little bit on the engagement strategy that we have been saying. It is important to have coordination of the different agents, customs, police, the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Health, and other bodies. So for each one have to have their role to play and know what would need to be done. The second part is looking at the legislative assessment, again, having a legal gap analysis, looking again at the different mercury-added products, and beyond the actual legislation which would ban the import, export, and manufacturing, we could be looking also in other areas like the labeling of different elements or other elements which could be like voluntary or supplementing the work which would lead us to phasing out the use of the mercury-added products bottom up. The third area would be looking at the infrastructure. Then again, it would be useful to see whether there are laboratories in place. Do we have the instruments necessary to control mercury-added products which are entering into the country, as well also how to deal with the waste part of the mercury-added products. Next slide, please. Then it is, of course, the data. In most cases, first inventory on the mercury-added products has been done under the Minamata initial assessments, but then it might be useful to look at different studies that have been done on the availability of mercury-free alternatives in the countries. These are now all over the world. See if there is a need to focus on some specific product, to find a few more details, for example, on cosmetics. How is this, whether these are used in the country, what is the effect? Some products may be more relevant than others for some countries, so this would be also useful to look at, including the harmonized system codes, which would also be developed at a country level and be very useful. Then we could be looking at the capacity building needs, whether there is a lack of training or lack of training with the customs of the police, or even in academia, or even in other areas of the structure and the country. And then finally, looking at the public awareness, which again, while many tools and material has been developed horizontally, there could be a need for targeted population awareness raising, and also looking at whether there is a lack of hazard and risk communication initiatives. Next, please. Now, having identified the gaps in the national situation and under the different categories, then it is very useful to actually go and see what are the solutions to those, what are the activities that we could do to meet these challenges. And then again, these respectively with the different categories that have been proposed, we might need to develop some committees and mainly some interagency bodies to meet, and also to actually check this same draft national action plan that would be developed. Looking, of course, at the different laws, as I said, not only the direct related laws from the Minamata, but also complementary ones, putting in as a plan to purchase XRF, or look at the needs of the laboratories, and then potentially look at the availability of mercury-free products, or monitoring cosmetics. Or again, we don't need to be doing everything, but this needs to be focused on the country needs and then eventually be prioritized. Training would be something which usually comes up as the needs for the countries. And then, as I said before, targeting populations such as health professionals, even dermatologists, when we're talking about the cosmetics, or young women and men, using those, this could be areas where the activities could focus. Next slide, please. And finally, the concrete deliverables and activities from these solutions that we have identified on the third step, these could be listed. We could identify who would be the lead agency. This would need to be agreed with the partners, identify the priority, and eventually the resources necessary for these tasks. And next slide, please. And I think that's the end of my slide. Thank you again. You can find this checklist, which, as I said, has now been updated on our website, and also the full guide when there is the intention of that this one will also be updated in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. I think it must have been quite challenging to have to make that presentation excellently in such a very short time. I don't know if it's possible for you to maybe write into the chat a link to the document you're speaking about. That's the full document on the checklist. Having listened to that, and I hope we have all benefited from that, I will now invite from Nigeria, Federal Ministry of Environment, Ms. Oluwatoyin Olabanji, to present on the experiences of Nigeria with developing and implementing strategies to combat, to control mercury-added products. Oluwatoyin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. My name is Oluwatoyin Olabanji. I'm an assistant director at the Federal Ministry of Environment, Nigeria. This afternoon, I'll be sharing Nigeria's experience in regulating mercury-added products, including a brief introduction, a summary of mercury inputs to society, and Nigeria's implementation process on the phase-out of mercury-containing products. Next slide, please. We are all aware that the objective of the Minamata Convention on Mercury is to protect human health and the environment from anthropogenic emissions and releases of mercury and mercury compounds. And Article 4 of the Convention requires that parties must have measures in place to phase out the manufacture, import, or export of mercury-added products. The Minamata Convention on Mercury Initial Assessment, the MIA, conducted in 2017, assisted Nigeria in gathering data, identifying gaps, and also laying out priorities. The report indicated that mercury-added products are present at significant level in Nigeria. As a result, Nigeria is implementing a phase-down and phase-out approach for various mercury-added products to protect its citizenry from the deleterious effects of mercury. Nigeria aims to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate mercury use in the manufacturing sector to protect human health and the environment. The next slide, please. Now, during the initial assessment conducted in 2017, it was revealed that consumer products with intentional use of mercury ranks high. This is clearly illustrated in the pie chart that you are looking at. The consumer products with intentional use of mercury ranks high, and the percentage divided across all the sector. The next slide, please. Additionally, sources, trade, and supply status of mercury-added products in Nigeria are highlighted in the table that you are looking at. Unfortunately, there's no time to actually look at it. The table clearly states the mercury sources in Nigeria, the production status, the trade and supply, import, and export status in Nigeria. It's clearly stated in the table that you're looking at. The next slide, please. Next slide, please.
You are onto your next slide already.
Oh, I've already talked about that. Okay, so the next slide. So the government of Nigeria is taking various measures to phase down and eventually phase out mercury in products. Now, I'd like you all to note that actions being taken are done jointly by relevant organizations in Nigeria. Organizations drawn from the environment sector, the health sector, the government agencies, relevant government agencies, the academia, the non-governmental organizations as well, are coming together, banding together to take actions on mercury in products in Nigeria. Some of these measures include the development of a national action plan on the phase-out of mercury in products. This plan includes legislative review and the development of guidelines, gathering baseline data, developing relevant national policies, awareness creation, and building necessary capacities. The plan was developed with the support of the specific international program, that's the CEP under the project Capacity Strengthening for Implementation of the Minamata Convention in Nigeria. Another measure is promoting alternatives to dental amalgam and working on developing a national policy on dental amalgam. We have a draft in place. That's a draft national policy on dental amalgam. Also preventing the inflow of amalgam from other countries through the National Compliance Monitoring and Enforcement Program, and updating dental school curricula and training of academic staff of dental schools. We are also developing minimum energy performance standards for lighting products in Nigeria. This will help in the implementation of the Minamata Convention on mercury for mercury-containing fluorescent lamps, with a goal to phase out fluorescents by the year 2024, 2025. That's the target that we have. Now, we are also planning to develop an action plan for the phase out of fluorescent lamps to meet up with the phase out dates and to carry out an inventory to have data on the quantity of linear and compact fluorescent lamps and LED lamps to forecast the waste to be generated. Now, as these lamps are being phased out, there will be stockpiles of all these lamps, and there's a need to actually have a plan on how to dispose the waste. We are also developing a national policy on cosmetic safety, and we are also promoting innovative solutions, technology transfer, and the introduction of alternatives to mercury-containing products that are affordable, easily accessible, effective, and environment-friendly. Most times, consumers are always complaining of effective alternatives, and also alternatives that are available, alternatives that are cheaper, not alternatives that are expensive. So we are promoting innovative solutions to ensure that these sustainable alternatives are available to consumers. That's some of the measures that we are taking currently in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The next slide, please. And so the government of Nigeria would like to once again thank the United Nations Environment Program, the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention on mercury, and the Secretariat of the Specific International Program for its technical and financial support. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oluwatoyin. That was a good one. I will now invite from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ms. Samantha Da Silva, who is Environmental Resource Analyst at the Sustainable Development Unit of the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development and Culture. Samantha, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Good day to all, and I'm very pleased to be here representing the national focal point for the Minamata Convention, the Sustainable Development Unit. Next slide, please. So as we make our way through this presentation on the national roadmap to phase out mercury-added products in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I would like to draw on a background stating that under the ACP-MEA's program, the European Environmental Bureau Zero Mercury Working Group and CARICOM did a regional conference in June last year, and as a follow-up, St. Vincent and the Grenadines drafted their national roadmap on the basis of the Zero Mercury Working Group checklist. Currently, we are building on this work towards developing a national action plan to phase out mercury-added products. Next slide. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is located in the southeastern Caribbean bordered by the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea, and collectively has an area of 389 square km and a population of 103,872, and this is according to our national statistic for the year 2018 to 2022. St. Vincent and the Grenadines became a party to the Minamata Convention on the 18th of August 2023. The Minamata Convention was completed in 2019 and that was published in 2021. Under the MIA, a national inventory was done and found the major sources of mercury releases and sources. I invite you to look at the figure on your right. The most significant source of mercury release was found to be in consumer products, and this category accounted for 54% of estimated mercury release nationally, but also the highest releases to land and general waste. The second largest was found to be due to the use and disposal of intentional products or process, and this category was also responsible for the largest releases to water. The third highest source was from the category waste incineration and burning. Regarding stockpiles, supply or trade, there's no notable activity in St. Vincent. Maps are imported in the country, but there are no map manufacturers here. SVG will continue to strengthen its legal, institutional, and administrative capacities to phase out this, because based on the results and gaps identified under the MIA, we want to strengthen the work and continue our efforts to improve our legal, institutional, and administrative frameworks. And these actions will not only allow us the opportunity to achieve our development goal, but it will also help us towards achieving our primary objective of the Minamata Convention. Next slide, please. So the objective of our national roadmap is really towards the development of a national action plan. This plan is geared towards identifying what actions are necessary when it comes to phasing out MAPs under Article 4. Using the Zero Mercury Working Group checklist to phase out MAPs, we have identified 4 key areas and have elaborated on that. 1, the development and implementation of a stakeholder engagement strategy, national assessment and gap identification, capacity needs, and national action plan. Next slide, please. Right, so this slide shows you development and implementation of the stakeholder engagement strategy. So under the MIA, of course, a national working group was formed. Now, this working group is going to be our primary coordination mechanism. However, at this stage, a term of reference has to be developed if it has to serve as an advisory body to assist the national focal point to put in place the provisions of the Minamata. So the national working group simply will have the responsibility for national level activity, but will also serve as a technical advisory capacity to the national focal point, and likewise act as a liaison between the national focal point and stakeholders for successful implementation. I would like to highlight some of the challenges when it comes to stakeholder engagement. Sometimes stakeholders, they tend to be engaged in multiple priorities and lack the time. And there's also difficulty in understanding what information needs to be reported to whom, who, and how often, even when it comes to understanding the true meaning of best practices, and meeting fatigue, which leads to, low representation of the key persons, the keeping of information in silos, the lack of SWOT analysis, and even simply resistance because of a lack of trust, personal circumstances. But with the national working group in place, we'll be able to address those challenges by having more regular meeting, supplying them with the documents that have been developed and are being developed. So like the Minamata initial assessment and the roadmap, our action plan, to be able to set further goals and timeline of deliverables and establish a mechanism for conducting outreach, evaluate and review what our needs are as the work progresses, and be able to share information. Next slide, please. Right. So for our national assessment and gap identification, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there's no single entity that was developed to address chemically related function. The responsibilities are shared by ministries, right, public sector, private sector, depending on the laws, and as well as the sector where chemicals are concerned. However, it was found that we lack a holistic regulatory approach. Sometimes our decisions are hampered by limited staff. And on top of that, there's no mercury-free procurement strategies in place. Legislative assessment. Yes, a legislative gap analysis was done under the MIA, but there also needs, we need legislation in order to support the ban of import of mercury-added product. So under this, we had considered having the draft chemical management policy and a draft environmental management bill. And there's also consideration for the Customs Act and the Standard Acts, to at least be updated. Next. In terms of infrastructure assessment, the state has laboratories, of course, but they are not equipped to facilitate any sort of maps testing. The landfills that are present, they are not designed to dispose of maps, per se. There is, at one facility, a separate structure in place for hazardous waste storage, but that in itself is not operational. In terms of an equipment, the XRF equipment, the country has one, but that came under the Stockholm Convention, a project on POPs. And overall, we lack the infrastructure for environmentally sound management of the map base. When it comes to data, okay, yes, we had inventory done in 2016, and we have data from that, and we know that information. But in terms of any sort of recent information as it pertains to the releases from the largest source of maps, it's lacking. So we have no specific data on the mercury-free alternatives, but studies that were carried out in neighboring islands. So in St. Vincent, no review or study was done on the availability of mercury-free convention compliance product after the MIA. However, studies in Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis show that while the additional national data for the availability of mercury-free alternatives to map could be used for the data from the neighboring islands, clearly indicates the availability in the region. We also lack the HS codes on map, and we also lack the evidence on specific map sectors, especially on cosmetics, because that's a relevant area. Next.
Samantha, you will actually need to speed up because we are really very constrained time-wise.
Sure.
Okay, please. 2 minutes more to wind up. Thank you.
Okay. So next slide. Okay, so these are
Samantha? Samantha?
I think we lost her.
That's a pity. Let's just see if she's able to come on. If not, we would take the opportunity to start on very, very short question and answer session. We're really very constrained time-wise, so we'll be able to take a few. I don't see anyone yet on the chat, but I think we can spend some 5 minutes to take any questions. And as you do that, if you raise your hands, you have to indicate who your question is directed towards. And so I open the floor for participants to indicate if they wish to make any interventions in form of questions or comments. And I think, as Isaku might point out later, there might be the opportunity for us to submit questions to the Secretariat after these webinar, since we will not be able to take as many questions as are likely to arise immediately. And we then endeavor to get back to you with answers to your questions and maybe make give you further opportunity to even interact. So we're waiting. Meanwhile, Isaku, if you have any comments that you wish to make, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Percy. Yes. So while waiting for any hand raised, I would like to congratulate Nigeria and also St. Vincent Grenadines. Although she was disconnected for the national. Yes, I think she's out now. But congratulate them on the national strategies. That will be a very good example for other parties. And I would like to note that the St. Vincent Grenadines was supported by the ACP project, which is also a project under the EU funding. So we very much appreciated the European Union's support to the implementation, and also the Oluwatoyin mentioned a number of action plans, which is outcome of the SIP program, Specific International Program, and by the way, the SIP fourth round is now alive, and the application is to be submitted by the end of July. But under the SIP program, we have Nigeria notified us that there all the work plans developed under the SIP programs can be made available to other parties. So we are preparing to make them public. This very sectoral work plan, and also she mentioned the dental amalgam, cosmetics, and lamps, and there are individual activities on the subject, including the Jeff funded program, and also she mentioned lamps, and one message from the COP Bureau member Mohamed Kamara of Sierra Leone was that he and his colleague CD of Mauritania, as the COP 6 Bureau members from Africa, are planning another webinar in July on lamps in cooperation of CLAPS, and I believe that he wished to convey that message. I think I will stop here for now, and if there's no question, perhaps I may take it for a game, but perhaps I will hand it back to Percy. Thanks.
Okay. There is a comment on the chat from Ubiamaka Okoli of Nigeria. She says Nigeria's experience shows that stakeholders' engagement is key to achieving the phase down And she says, we are requesting for the training materials be made available to us. I suppose that's a given already, that the training materials are very, very readily available on the website, Minamata Convention, isn't it? And maybe when finalized, be able to even distribute it to several regional platforms that already exists, so that people can have very quick and ready access to the training materials. As Bimbo had explained, what has been presented is a very short summary of the document, which is about 70-something pages, I guess. So that will be available. Thank you. I don't see any hands raised or any other comments yet. Let me see. The checklist, the document of the checklist is already shared. I mean, the link has been placed on the chat by Elena. All the presentations and recordings of the webinar will be included. That information is already on the chat. Rovimbo has put that up. Okay, I see no other, and there are other links, I think. The links to the versions of the PowerPoints and so on. So having said that, I think we are almost at the end of the scheduled 1 hour for this webinar. And I would like to thank all the presenters, Bimbo, Elena, Batoy, Samantha, and Isaku also. And at this point, I hand over to Isaku for the closing remarks. Isaku, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Percy. And since Elena's videos turned on again, I think she may wish to say 1 minute word.
Okay, she's back. Okay.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, it's very good to hear that countries have been using the checklist. We hope that they find it useful, and if people have questions, I'm happy to assist them with that as much as possible, and given, of course, the different time constraints. Yeah, we will be uploading also the different studies on the availability of mercury-free products, for example, like the ones that they were developed in the Caribbean. And also I can highlight that in terms of the lamps, CLASP had published already last year in preparation for the COP studies from 60 countries, where you can actually see the availability of mercury-free lamps and the depreciation rate, which is very, very fast. So it's really worth going directly for the mercury-free lamps. So yeah, and apologies, I think, from Samantha, because they had power cuts, as she was telling us also earlier on. She's there now. I can see her. Okay. Thank you again.
Hi, yes, I'm so sorry about that. The country had experienced some power outages during the weekend, and we have been receiving some, internet problems. So I'm very, very sorry about that.
Thank you, Samantha. And your presentation will be made available on the website. So I think your work is not lost. So since we it is time to close, thank you very much for your participation, and I'm very encouraged by the request for the making public the training material, because that's what exactly we did. And the training material is available in PDF and also PPT format, so that you can arrange it. You can supplement with your information on national legislation and make use of it in the domestic or regional context. So we very much look forward to working with you further to protect the human health and the environment from mercury. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everybody.